You're desperate. An avoidant is pulling away from you, and you're worried it's going to be forever. So you do what everyone does in situations like this. You take to the internet looking to stop it from happening. And all sorts of advice hits your radar. Don't chase them. Focus on yourself. Set boundaries. All of it is pretty good, but it's sort of generic. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and the truth is, I've only really found one piece of advice that consistently works to make an avoidant stop pulling away from you. You need to mirror their emotional distance, but then shift the dynamic in a way they don't expect. And there's really two parts to this strategy. There's the obvious part that everyone already does, mirroring their behavior. So when they pull back, you pull back. And that's where most people stop. Because reality is that mirroring alone isn't enough. It is essential that you shift the dynamic in a way they don't expect. Here, I'll tell you a story. I'm a big fan of comic books, so let's just depict this entire story as if it was a comic book. Our protagonist is Miranda, a woman in her late 20s. She's smart, driven, but secretly desperate to settle down. After years of dating disasters, she finally meets Bob, and she's convinced he could be the one. They've been dating for 6 months, and she's already picturing their future, marriage, kids, the whole thing. But Bob's an avoidant. At first he seemed just as interested, but now he's pulling away. Texts have slowed, calls are less frequent, and he's becoming more distant. Miranda's anxiety kicks in. She goes online and reads the advice to mirror his distance, stop texting first, pull back emotionally, play it cool. She thinks if she can do this, he'll notice and come back, but it doesn't work. Days turn into weeks, and Bob keeps drifting away. Miranda tries to keep her cool, but deep down she's anxious, second-guessing everything. Finally, Bob hits her with the dreaded, "I don't think this is working out." Just like that, Bob leaves. Miranda's attempt to mirror him didn't really stop him from pulling away. If anything, it gave him a clear exit. But why? Well, like I said, she only did one part of the equation, and it was the most obvious part, mirroring. What she was missing was the second part, the whole shifting the dynamic. Okay, let's back up to the part of the little comic story where Bob pulls away. So this time, instead of just mirroring Bob's behavior, she does something different. She mirrors his distance, but adds a twist. Miranda subtly starts to signal her own independence. Instead of just playing it cool, she starts focusing on her own life, going out with friends, picking up hobbies, and making plans that don't involve Bob. She's not just mirroring him, she's showing that she's perfectly fine without him. Bob notices. He begins to feel a shift in control. Suddenly, he's not the one holding all the cards. Miranda isn't waiting around for him. She's living her life. This creates a sense of uncertainty in Bob's mind. For the first time, he starts to wonder if he's losing her for good. He starts reaching out more. He initiates plans. Bob slowly re-engages. Not because Miranda chased him, but because her independence forced him to see what he could be losing. This time, the dynamic has shifted. Miranda didn't just mirror his distance. She made him wonder if she was lost or gone forever. And if you really think about it, it does make total sense. Have you ever heard of the concept of schemas or an internal working model? It's basically this mental framework that's shaped by our past experiences. It influences how we perceive and interpret new people and situations. In relationships, attachment theory specifically, attachment schemas or internal working models refer to the way that we see ourselves or others based on our relationship with our caregivers. For example, if someone grew up with an emotionally unavailable caregiver, they might develop a schema that people will always pull away or cannot be trusted with emotional closeness. But a schema can also form based on relationship experiences. In the case of an avoidant, if they've been in and out of relationships where their partners consistently responded with anxiety when they pulled away, they might form a schema or belief that says, all the people I date are overly anxious or clingy. This becomes their mental framework for future relationships. So when they enter a new relationship and start pulling away, they expect their partner to behave anxiously, even before it happens. This perception reinforces their avoidance because they anticipate the partner will fit the same pattern they've experienced before. The avoidance schema becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where their behaviors, pulling away, cause the partner to react anxiously, which of course reinforces the avoidance belief that their partners are always too needy. And what I've tended to notice is that when you date an avoidant, an attachment battle of sorts begins to commence. So let's say you have like a secure attachment style and they have an avoidant attachment style. When you pit these two attachment styles against one another, one of two things is going to happen. The secure will shift to being more insecure as a result of the avoidant, or the avoidant will shift towards being more secure as a result of the secure attachment. Here's the deal. It's far more common for the secure person to fall into insecurity. Why? Well, it's because life constantly challenges your sense of security. Stress, rejection, conflict, all of these experiences chip away at someone's emotional foundation. When you're secure, it's easy to take things in stride. But in a relationship with an avoidant, you're slowly pulled into a dynamic that can trigger your fears of abandonment or cause you to doubt your self-worth. The avoidance distance, lack of communication, and emotional unavailability can even make the most secure person start questioning themselves. On the flip side, it's actually really difficult for an avoidant to want to become more secure. Their avoidant behavior is deeply ingrained, often rooted in childhood experiences and reinforced by their schemas, those mental frameworks that say, people can't be trusted or emotional closeness is dangerous. These schemas are incredibly resilient. They've spent years learning how to avoid intimacy and closeness. And it's because of that, their defense mechanisms are incredibly strong. It's like a battle where one side, the secure, is constantly under attack from forces of insecurity, while the other side, the avoidant, has reinforced armor built from years of emotional self-protection. That's why, in most cases, it's the secure person that changes. They become more anxious, more insecure as a result of the avoidance behavior. So, with this in mind, let's go back to our whole concept of mirroring with a twist. Mirroring in and of itself is just a really fancy way of saying give them space. But what I've tended to notice is that even if you're secure, just this idea of having to give up control and give someone space is incredibly difficult. And really what it does is it makes trying to show them that you're fine without them that much more difficult. But let's just say that you've gotten the whole let's give them space part down. It's the twist that gives people fits. I've noticed that most folks, when an avoidant pulls away, often react by taking the behavior personally. They essentially respond in an insecure way. A secure person might come at it from a place of curiosity, and maybe even a little touch of concern. They're willing to give space and signal their own independence by essentially moving on with their lives. And it's that moving on aspect that is always lost with the masses. I got my start on YouTube primarily making content about breakups. It's been an interesting trajectory. Every year I learned something new, whether it was through research or my own observations. I'd add it to my approach, sometimes adjusting the advice I'd give to people going through breakups. But here's the thing. Things didn't really change for me until I started actually interviewing the success stories, the people who got their exes back and asking them what worked. That's when I began to notice patterns. I found that the real key wasn't in some secret hack or manipulation tactic. It was in something far more basic but much harder to do: moving on and letting go. That was the one thing that almost every success story had in common. And here's the irony: most people want the sexy advice. They want to hear, do this one thing and the avoidant will just come running back. It's that simple. But more often than not, it's the unsexy advice that actually works. And to be honest with you, this unsexy advice is rooted in real psychology. Look at this. This is a quote from, once again, one of my favorite avoidant resources, Free to Attach. Avoidants are free to long for an ex once that person is unavailable, out of a relationship, and typically out of contact. What it's basically saying is that you need to let go of an avoidant. If you can do that, that is when the greatest chance of them daydreaming about you will happen. And that's why the twist that we're talking about in this video works incredibly well. It's about stepping back, focusing on yourself, and genuinely detaching from the outcome. That's the truth people don't always want to hear, but it's the advice that's grounded in what actually works. It's not about chasing after someone or figuring out the perfect move to bring them back. It's about creating space for them to return by truly letting go. But there's still something about this that kind of bugs me. You see, if this works so well, why doesn't everyone get their avoidant ex back by just letting go? And the truth is, there's a deeper reason for why avoidants react the way they do to you detaching. And it has to do with what's going on in their mind when you let go. It's not as simple as just longing for you once you're gone. There's a specific internal struggle that avoidants will go through. And most people aren't even talking about this. Check this out. Avoidants crave connection on some level, but they fear the intimacy that comes with it. And it creates a paradox of sorts. Think of it like a moth in a flame. The moth is naturally drawn to the light. It craves the warmth and the brightness, just as an avoidant craves connection. But every time the moth gets too close to the flame, it risks getting burned. So it flutters away to stay safe, even though it's still drawn to the light. For avoidants, intimacy is the flame. They want to be near it, but the closer they get, the more they fear being hurt. So they keep their distance, trying to protect themselves. Yet they can't entirely resist the pull of the connection. It's a constant push-pull struggle between desire and fear. However, once you detach and step back, it's as if the flame suddenly flickers out. The avoidant, who once felt in control by pulling away, now starts to feel the unsettling loss of control. The safety they once felt from distancing themselves is replaced by a growing fear of abandonment. And now, in your absence, they start to feel the pull even stronger. No longer because they want to stay safe, but because the connection is slipping through their fingers. Here's the key. Avoiding emotional closeness and fearing abandonment are in direct conflict. When you're present and available, they push you away to avoid intimacy. But when you're no longer in their life, they can't help but feel the loss of you, which of course creates a sense of longing. They're caught between two forces, wanting the safety of distance and fearing the emptiness that comes from actually being alone. The struggle is actually what makes letting go so powerful. It's not that they miss you the way a secure person might miss you, but they start to feel the void left behind by you, which kind of makes them question their decision to detach from you in the first place. But do you see how unstable this all is? I mean, think about it. Avoidants are constantly torn between two extremes, the desire for connection and the fear of intimacy. This internal push-pull creates this chaotic environment for them. So when you let go, it can trigger the fear of abandonment and cause them to re-engage. But the timing and their ability to process those feelings are incredibly unstable. And it's that chaos that explains why not everyone who lets go ends up getting their avoidant back. The avoidant's reaction isn't always predictable. Sometimes their fear of losing control over the relationship makes them long for the person who left, but other times their fear of emotional vulnerability is stronger, and they convince themselves that staying distant is safer, even if it means being alone. The reality is that their internal battle creates a volatile environment. It's not a linear process where letting go automatically pulls them back in. It's more like stirring up a storm. Sometimes it makes them come back, but other times it pushes them further away. So while letting go does increase your chances of shifting the dynamic, it doesn't work all the time because avoidants are kind of trapped in an emotional chaos of their own. And not every avoidant is willing to face that battle. But here's the interesting thing I've learned in interviewing people who actually let go. Maybe at first it comes from a selfish desire to reconnect, to get an ex back, but in the journey to becoming more secure, a profound thing begins to happen. Letting go becomes more about letting go and less about trying to win someone back.